So now this is where I want to kind of, add one more point and take the question further. Now, even as we mentioned, if 95% of the companies, whether it is SMEs or large firms, if they have not embraced knowledge management, one of the, what do you think, if they start using this ISO standard, don't you think it could some way benefit to move from zero to at least 2-3 steps further? I mean, that's definitely is going to help.
The first thing is you've got to put up the value proposition for knowledge management.
Okay.
That's the first thing. Are you still with me?
Yeah. I can hear you.
Yeah, right. Okay. Put up the value proposition for knowledge management itself.
Okay.
And that is pretty important. Now you can talk about the time to search for knowledge, all that sort of stuff. It's a little bit airy-fairy. To be honest, when you talk in front of the C-suite, you start to pull these out. They say, yeah. really, how much bottom line profit am I going to get? And so that's why I say lead with lessons learned, because you can actually value that.
Indeed, yeah.
But then when you and I think the standard talks about this, is when you implement your knowledge management, you need to put the metrics in. You need the metrics in there to measure how successful you're being.
Yeah.
And that basically says, you can do one interesting exercise, and this is back from the 1960s.
Yeah, please.
One of the IT managers printed all the reports and put them in a room. And when people came and complained, he gave them their report. And at the end of the month, he had a room 3/4 full of paper. It would be very interesting to turn off all the knowledge management in a company and see how long they lasted. True. If you're game. But what we're seeing is the companies that are doing it well do have the metrics. They can quote the number of client service requests answered within 3 minutes, answered without referring. If it's escalated, one of the things which we measured with a tribunal one time, we had to prove the value of the tribunal, and what we did is we mentioned how many cases they heard, what percentage went to appeal, and what percentage of appeals were upheld. Right? In other words, what was our activity level? How many people thought we got it wrong, and then when it went to jurisdiction, how many times were we proven to be wrong? And those 3 simple measures enabled us to show that the body was performing extremely well. And therefore we could justify our existence. Now I think you can take the same approach with knowledge management. If you look at the number of calls to the call center, how many are resolved immediately? How many times does the user then complain or come back for a second question? And then how many times are they escalated, etc.? How many lawsuits did you get would be a good final thing. But you need to set those metrics up, and the standard says you should.
Yes.
So
that's one of the
that's all practical stuff.
Right. I agree. Yeah. I think bringing this the world view into the practicality of this governance, I think that's something which needs to be stressed and maybe given a much better shape. I think I think Knoco is already publishing a lot of reports on this, I guess.
Well, this is the point. If people say they're doing knowledge management, but they're not following the standard, then you can ask them, well, show me your metrics. If you're doing metrics, then you're doing the standard.
Yes. That's where the whole point is. See, I mean,
it's all very simple.
See, this is where I actually sometimes find it kind of share my thought is, because see, the natural way of doing things, I mean, you kind of find what is the challenge and find, okay, we'll try to create a solution, whatever the solution could be. Then again, over a period of time, you have to support the people, users, and develop that further, and make sure that user usage and qualitatively, quantitatively you understand. Once you understand it, then you'll also understand, okay, whether it has been useful or not. So
That's right.
the moment you start doing it, you are already, I mean, so the natural way of doing itself has been kind of put in a framework. I mean, that's
now one thing
I see.
One thing I'd like to talk about, Shekar, is ISO 9001. Now, can you allow me to share my screen, please?
Sure, please go ahead. I think I've already given.
Yep. There we are.
Please,
This is ISO 9001 2015, clause 716.
Yeah.
And it says thou shalt become a learning organisation. And it talks about organisational knowledge. Now, ISO 30401 really spells this out in a lot more detail. But what strikes me is the number of companies who are already certified to 9001, or where the certification company is currently engaged, and they're not looking at this clause at all.
Yeah.
This is quite quite clear. An organisation shall consider its current knowledge and determine how to acquire or access any additional knowledge and required updates. And I think this is very important, because within the Knoco world, we talk about a project knowledge plan. And this comes up quite often in that when you start a project, you are given a project team. And the first step has to be, what are the knowledge gaps? What knowledge do we need to do this, to make this project a success? And what are the gaps? And how am I going to address them?
Right.
And so it all becomes important. That becomes a knowledge management exercise in itself.
That's true. Yeah.
And it's a very important one. You need to determine the critical knowledge. And the critical knowledge for each project is different, because your project team is different.
Yes.
All right.
Definitely.
And it specifically sells out here in Note 2 that lessons learned is an important part of organisational knowledge, which is why I'm so keen to promote that part of knowledge management. So that's very important. And I think for people in knowledge management, you should, if the company's anywhere near 9001, hit them with this clause. Definitely. Okay.
Yeah, that's amazing point which you have shared, Jan. I think if a company is already 9001 prepared, obviously they would have touched upon 9001, which already they would be following certain nomenclature of documentation, certain control of documents, and master document list related to access document. Yeah, of course. I mean, so this is a great starting point. I mean, which they would have already done. I mean, yes.
That clause was not in 2008. All right, so that was added in 2015. But people are coming up for their 3-year audit now. My problem is that the 9001 certifiers may not be really able to judge that clause and how well a company is. So they may need some external help. And certainly providing external help to companies for that clause and for 30401 is a legitimate activity for us consultants. That's one of the problems we've got, I think, worldwide, as your post has highlighted. There just aren't enough certifiers.
Right.
I would suggest that many of the certification companies in Australia would not gear up for 30401. There may be some individuals, but certainly not the big certification companies. That's my feeling, talking through the quality people.
Okay. So you have actually brought out the contentious or most debated topic from last several weeks. So now, how do you see? I mean, let's say in Australia, when we are talking about accredited bodies or any entity, accredited entity, how does it work in Australia? Currently, do you have any knowledge management accredited bodies, or does your organization does that? How does it work?
Oh, well, we as a consultant,
Mm-hmm.
we go in and we'll do typically an assessment, a framework, and a strategy
Okay.
as a consultancy project,
Mm-hmm.
and basically that just sets them up.
Okay.
Sometimes we get asked to go back and monitor them,
Mm-hmm.
but I think the way in which we are pitching is a whole lot of individual assignments. So it
Okay.
might be a project knowledge management plan, show them how to do that. It might be training in how to do after action reviews.
Mm-hmm.
It might be review their mentoring, perhaps advise on their community practice.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
there's a lot of traps in setting them up.
Mm-hmm.
But that tends to be how we work as consultants.
Okay.
There are quite a few consultants in Australia. There's a few companies have got their own knowledge managers, and they tend to have a wider scope in terms of getting involved in content curation, intranets, a lot of IT related things, and that's
Okay.
legitimate.
Okay.
But yeah, that's pretty much how knowledge management works in Australia. We're in tune with the international market, and we obviously talk a lot, and everybody's on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
And we hold very successful gatherings and conferences when we're allowed to meet together.
Sure. Yeah. That's kind of provides us, kind of overview of how the knowledge management landscape, especially as a service being provided in Australia. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Now, actually, I had made a note of one of the very important word which I heard, which is really very interesting. What is this Guerrilla KM?
What is the which?
Gorilla. You mentioned about
Guerrilla
Yeah,
KM.
Gorilla KM. Yes.
Yeah, right. That's what happens. All right.
Yeah.
I actually did a paper on this, which I might send to you.
Okay, sure.
Basically, what it says is that the company doesn't want to do knowledge management. Nobody has set up to do knowledge management. There is no knowledge management strategy. There is no knowledge management plan. But within the organisation, you're doing knowledge management.
It's possible. Yeah.
You don't have any authority. You're just doing it.
Yes.
And an awful lot of people are actually doing it.
Indeed.
And so what you'll see, you'll see people who may be in IT, they may be a content manager, will be looking at the standard for guidance on what to do next.
Yeah, sure.
But there's an awful lot goes on in, for example, mentoring. If a company has a mentoring
program,
regime, then they're doing knowledge management, but they don't know they're doing knowledge management.
Exactly. It's just the labels. Yeah. Not using the different labels.
That's
yes.
right. If their project methodology says you will do a stage gate review on a project, they're doing an after action review. So let's drop all the things. And so one of the interesting things is to go into a company and say, well, by knowledge management, I mean what you're doing in mentoring, plus what you're doing on stage gate reviews, plus what you're doing on et cetera, et cetera. That's all called knowledge management.
Yes.
And you need to be able to pitch it. I can do knowledge management in 60 seconds, and I've done that, and it's on YouTube. And that gets the message across. Okay. That's basically my elevator pitch anyway. Okay. But it's not rocket science. Knowledge management is about the transfer of knowledge, and simple as that, through all its forms. So it's a very simple concept. People innately understand it. The question is how to do it, and how much effort to put into it, and for the C-suite, how much is it going to cost me. You'll find, by the way, very few organisations have a knowledge management team greater than one or two. No matter how big they are. It's a coordination role. It's an oversight role. All the work's done by everybody else. And so, it's never a big ask, but it is a matter of time. And so you are taking people's time to perhaps review content, or perhaps take that trouble to mentor the new person.
It's it's more focused, and more energy is given towards that direction, right? Yeah.
So that's probably why, because it's not a big ticket item, that's probably why it doesn't get up the C-suite ladder very often. But you can again, I come back to lesson to learn. When I got one client, I said, just get your guys to send me 10 lessons. And I got the guys to value them. And I went back to the manager and I said, do you realize those 10 lessons cost you $4 million? He said, what? And I said, well, that's the way your guys have valued it. And suddenly we were off and going. But you can, NASA, the space agency, talks about the NASA bus. How big does the bus have to be such that if it crashes, we've lost all our competence? So within the biochemical research laboratory, it might be 3. You've got a vulnerability there. So you can talk to, I think, senior management along those lines about vulnerabilities if you lose people accidentally or they get up and leave. And that's going to be a problem with COVID, because there's going to be a lot of people who will take early retirement because they're now really comfortable working from home. There's going to be people, who don't get re-employed. I think there's going to be a problem with diversity, in that I think that the younger people are going to be the last ones to be brought back into the organisation. That's true. And that's going to really set the diversity back. And so we're also going to have a lot more of onboarding. Now, one of the things I've been impressed with is you ask companies, how long does induction take? And they say, it's a 3 or 4 hour exercise, or it's a 1 week exercise. We know with the much maligned millennials, it's 7 months. So you need to set yourself up for a 6 to 7 month induction process. And that doesn't mean they're not productive in that time, but you need to be monitoring their onboarding for that 6 or 7 months.
Indeed.
And one of the impressive ones that Eric Sue brought up, I think it was Singapore Power or Hong Kong Power, I can't remember which. They actually do formalise it. They talk about introducing the incomer to the relevant communities of practice, their community of practice champion. They're shown how to post to that and how to ask questions. And so that whole 7 months is organised, which I thought was really good. And I think we're going to have to do a lot more of that.
Sorry, please go ahead.
Going back many years, I was hired by a chemical company out of university before I sat my exams. But it was 2 years before I was allowed to take up that position. I had to start working on the shop floor, then in the production office. I had to work my way up through IT, through all the jobs before I was allowed to do that job. Now that was 2 years. That was a luxury back in the 60s. We don't have that luxury anymore. But I think we've got to go from where we are now of a half day or a 1 month induction to something like 6 to 7 months of at least a mentor over that induction.
Now I want
we're going to be doing a lot more onboarding because of the churn of people not staying with organisations for 100 years like they used to.